Welcome, everyone. As we learn Torah Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, as always, we begin with appreciation to TorahAnytime.com for giving this remarkable platform to teach Torah all over the world. We thank as well the remarkable work of Kol HaLashon with their global network, and our other carriers, Torah Communications Network, YouTube, and Facebook, and our subscribers, and our Zoomers, my family in the Agudas Yisrael of Fairways in Lakewood, as we broadcast from my bungalow in South Fallsburg, in Elmshade Estate. And tonight, it developed that we have an amazing team of sponsors. First, we have the Goldenberg and Noble families that are sponsoring the Shiur Le'ilui Nishma Zev Wolf Ben Baruch. Walter Goldenberg, his neshama should have an aliyah, a lichtige Gan Eden. He should be a Melitz Yosher for his family. We are sponsored by Ed Saleh from London, one of our Bava Basra sponsors, who's sponsoring the Shiur. It was just his mother's yahrzeit. Le'ilui Nishmas Farha Bas Aaron. Her neshama should have an aliyah. She should have a lichtige Gan Eden, and be a Melitz Yosher for her family, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael. We have an anonymous sponsor sponsoring Refuah Shalema for Tmima Basrina Leah. She should have a Refuah Shalema b'Serek Sha'achel Yisrael. And we have a partial sponsorship by Tzvi and Yehudis Solomon in honor of our Zoom Talmud Philippe Black, who is a Talmud in the Young Israel of Brookline for 15 years in the Sunday morning Gemara Shiur, and they want to wish him that he should have Atzlacha with his Aliyah this Sunday and grow in Torah Ruchnius, and of course have Atzlacha and Ruchnius and Gashmias. They also want to do it Le'ilui Nishmas, their father-in-law, Mr. Evan Schechter, who they told me was a Talmud of mine, Shlomo Chaim ben Avram. His neshama should have an aliyah. Also, that he wanted to give a bracha to my wife and I, that we should, for our Habatzas Torah, we should have Atzlacha, Azisa Shalom Bayis, Gesund, and Nachas, and everything wonderful, Parnasa B'Revach. I also want to mention that I have a Talmida in Staten Island who they found Lo Aleinu a melanoma, and she's going to have a surgery. So Rachel Malka Bas Tzipora, she should have a Refuah Shalema b'Serek Sha'achel Yisrael. Vayetze Oig Melech Habashim L'krosam. Oig came out to greet them. Vayomer Hashem El Moshe Al Tira Isai. Don't be afraid of him. Now Rashi says, obviously Rashi doesn't ask the question, but he's coming to, it doesn't say that he shouldn't be afraid of Sichon. Now Sichon was also a prehistoric giant. There's an opinion that Sichon was born in the Teva, and that's why, and he was actually a grandchild of Noach. That's why in the word Sichon is Noach, and he was also a giant, and Moshe Rabbeinu defeated him easily. So that's not why Hashem told to Moshe Al Tira Oisai. Rather, Rashi says, Sheya Moshe Yorei Lihilachem. Moshe was afraid to battle with him. Shemet Tamad Lo Yischus Shel Avram. Lest there still be the merit of Avram. Shenemar, as it says, Vayavai HaPolit. We know that Oig was called the Polit, either because he escaped from the attack of Nimrod, or because he escaped from the flood. He hung out outside the Teva, and Noach gave him food. And it refers to the fact that Oig came to Avram and told him that Lot was taken captive, and therefore Avram went on the rescue mission and rescued the hostages. May all our hostages be rescued. And he rescued the hostages, and from Lot's daughters came Malchus Beis David and the eventual Melech Mashiach. So Og was the messenger, was the emissary, was the shliach that led to the saving of Malchus Beis David. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of that merit, that merit might protect Og. So of course, on this, the Dazakanim and the Sifsei Chachamim ask, but Rashi tells us that Og's thoughts, Og's purpose for telling this to Avram was a nefarious one, was a diabolical one, was a murderous one, because he was planning that Moshe Rabbeinu, Avram Avinu should die, and then he would marry the beautiful Sarah. Remember, Sarah was one of the most beautiful women in the history of mankind. Now remember, this is Og. Og was from the generation of the flood that desired other people's wives. So Og was acting in kind. So how could such a merit save him if he really was planning to generate death and adultery? How could that be? How could that be? So everybody answers, and this is a remarkable thing. If a person does something that generates good, even if their idea, even if their motivation was for bad, but if they generated a hatzalah, so then they'll get rewarded for it. And the biggest proof is that it says that in the schar that Balak, the king of Moav, brought 42 karbanos to Hashem when Bilam was going to curse Klal Yisrael. He was zeicha that there was born from him Rus, of course, who was the ancestress of David HaMelech. Now, why did Balak bring these animals? He brought these animals to facilitate Bilam's ability to curse and harm Klal Yisrael. So his plotting was certainly murderous, his plotting was certainly nefarious, and yet he was rewarded. Now, we have to understand that the Shevet Musar, Rav Wosner, in his Sefer Agadas Eliyahu, brings down a remarkable thing. He says that a person is rewarded even for very ugly mitzvahs. Even for very ugly mitzvahs. And he gives an example, he actually gives two examples of ugly mitzvahs. He says, let's say Chatzkel was committing adultery. And while he was committing adultery, what happened is Chaim was going to kill Reuven. But when he chanced upon Reuven, Chatzkel was there committing adultery. And because Chatzkel was there, he got afraid and he didn't kill Reuven. Chatzkel will get reward for saving Reuven's life. And but Chatzkel wasn't there to save a life. Chatzkel was there committing adultery, doing one of the most terrible sins in the Torah. Another example he gives is a Zaina who gets paid for her Aveira. And with that money, she supports a Talmud Chacham and helps him. She's going to get rewarded for that. So we see over here that the Rabbeinu Shalom, who does Rav Chesed and is Mata Klapa Chesed, Hashem gives schar for this. Now this is, as I said, this is something that's very reassuring. So you'll say, what do I mean that this is reassuring? Many times we're down upon ourselves that we say, oh, I make so many brachas during the day, shahakals and mazaynises, and I never have any kavanah in them. And I zip through my davening without thought. I put on my tefillin without kavanah. I pass mezuzahs without any concentration. We have to know that we find over here that the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving reward even when there's cruel intent. Even when I wanted Avram to die and commit adultery with Sarah. And Chatzka was committing adultery when he saved Reuven's life. The Rebbeinu Shalom still gives a reward. He certainly will give reward if we don't have any negative intent. We're just lacking the proper kavanah. He's certainly going to give reward. Like it says, Kikel Shemea Tfilas Kol Peh. Hashem listens to the prayer even if it only comes from the mouth. Although I told you that they say, jokingly, that a tefillah which is kol peh, which is only from the mouth, is feh. It's worth feh. But the Rebbeinu Shalom gives, even though we know, of course, that one of our missions in life is Rachmana Liba Boy, that the merciful one wants our heart. It's true, we just learned in Masechtas Bava Basra that the dimensions of the luchas were square. They were 6 by 6 tvachim. It's a Beferish Gemara, Gemara in Bava Basra, and Daf Yudalid. So how could it be that on the Aron Kodesh all over the world they're rounded on top? It's not like the Gemara. So I heard once from Rav Shapiro that the rounding represents the 2 chambers of the heart. And it's to remind us that in our Torah, Rachmana Liba Boy, Rebbeinu Shalom wants our heart. Of course, that's l'chatchila, and that's what we work on. However, we have to know that without it, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives schar. He even gives schar if it's a murderous intent. Surely if it's just bereft of the proper intention, the Rebbeinu Shalom is not mekapeach sarar kol beria. So even if we learn Torah for honor, even if we give tzedakah for honor, Hashem surely gives reward. Now, we're talking about Oig over here. Why was Oig called Oig? So, we know that the Medrash says that his real name was Polit. But he was called Oig because when he came to Avram, Avram was baking matzahs. And they were round, right? Aguga means circular matzahs. And therefore he was called Oig because of this. Now, at first glance, this sounds strange. A man who learned, it says a man who lived 800 years, he's called Oig because he saw matzahs. So I always learned that it tells us that the holiest thing that Oig saw in his 800 years of wasted life was Avram Avinu baking matzahs. The heilige afias matzahs of Avram, that was the holiest thing that Oig saw in his life. That's why he was known as Oig. However, there's a fascinating medrash. Actually, it's a zoyar. It's a zoyar in this week's Parsha, Kuf Pei Daled. The zoyar says that when Avram was baking matzahs, so Oig smelled it, and it smelled heavenly, and he wanted to have from the matzahs. Now remember, the Korban Pesach wasn't able to be eaten by an orel. And Avram Avinu told Oig, you can't have the matzahs because you circumcised yourself. Can't have it. I'm sorry, you can't have it because you're uncircumcised. You're an orel. So Oig, because he desired to partake of the matzah, he circumcised himself. And it says in the Zohar that this is a reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of Og all those years later when he went to conquer Og, because he circumcised himself with great mesiras in order to partake of the mitzvah of matzah. And actually it says in the Zohar that we know this because it says by Avram, B'chol anshe beisai nimolu itai, all of the members of his house circumcised with him, kol comes l'rabbis Og. And it's because of this milah that Og was zoicha tarichas yamim, to live so long. So the Gemara says, so then why, no, so now the question is, so then Og had schusim. So then why did Hashem say, Al tira isai? Maybe there was something to be afraid of. So the Zohar says, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, don't be afraid of Og's milah, because he was not shomer kedushas habris. During his lifetime, he engaged in all types of promiscuity, and therefore, since he wasn't shomer the bris does not protect him. This is a very important thing, because we know it's brought down that Avram Avinu stands by the door of Gehenna, and he doesn't let anyone in who has the bris milah. But that's only if a person is careful to keep the kedushas habris, right? But Og, who was oiker the kedushas habris, so therefore Hashem said, Al tira isai, don't be afraid of it. By the way, I pointed out, and it's a good thing to know, that also it says that Osher, it's a Medrash Talpias, that Osher stands by the door of Gehenna and doesn't let anybody in who learns Mishnayos every day. And we said that that's Pshat, may Osher Shmeina Lachmai, and Osher Shmeina is Oisius Mishnah. It's what a tremendous thing. When we learn the Mishnah Yaimis, we are protecting ourselves from Gehenna. That's a very big thing. And I always said that it's a remarkable thing that Shas starts off with the word Mei Mosai Kairin Shema Ba'arvin. When do you start saying Shema in the evening? Now that's a very strange way to start Shas, because the Gemara tells us in Pesachim that Rebbe's style was Tana Loshen Kitzora Naked. He used a terse, brief style. That's why there's so much Gemara to explain the Mishnah, because it's written very terse and very brief. And yet he starts Shas with a very verbose word. It could have said Masai. It could have said a Masai. But it says Mei Masai. But if you figure the gematria of Mei Masai, you see it's exactly 501, which is the gematria of Osher. Because Rebbe wanted to put Osher in the beginning of Shas to remind people that if we invest in learning Mishnayos every day, then that's a fire insurance. Now, but what about the other schus that Og had? That because of what he did, Malchus Beis David was saved. He told Avram Avinu that Lot was taken in captivity, and Avram, in a miraculous way, right? He threw straw and it became spears and grass and it became arrows, and he saved Lot and his daughters, and from the daughters came Malchus Beis David. So Og was generated the future Melech HaMashiach and David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech. So why wasn't that something to be afraid of? So Reb Leibel Katz, in the Sefer Oyel Aryeh, quotes from Rav Steinman an interesting answer. He says, Rav Steinman says that Og lost the merit because he was saved by the Tzaddik Hadar Noach. And he had incredible miracles. He was hanging outside the teva for an entire year. The water was boiling all around him. Steam was coming up. Everybody died. Hashem cooled the waters around him. And Noach fed him from the teva every day that he should live. So he was saved by the tzaddik Hashem of the generation. And yet he wanted to destroy an ummah shlema because of that kofui toy, because of that lack of gratitude. He lost the schus of what he did, saving Lot. And now I want to share with you something else that Rev Leibel Katz brings down in his Oyel Aryeh. He brings it down in the name of Echad min HaGedolim. It says, B'Shem Echad min HaGedolim, from one of the great people. He doesn't say who said it, but he expounds upon the pasuk of the Kol Kli Pasuach, any open earthenware vessel, Asher Ein Samid Pasal Olav, that doesn't have a tightly sealed cover, Tamehu. This means that if an earthenware vessel is in a house with a corpse, and it doesn't have a tightly sealed cover, so the tumah enters into it, because a klei cheres is metame me'aviroi, from its airspace, and it becomes tumah. Says this gadol that this pasuk could be explained homiletically. The kol kli, and all utensils, it says the mouth is our major utensil. The kol kli pasuach, asher ein samid pasal olav, that doesn't have a tightly sealed cover, but rather we let our mouth spew loosely without guarding it and covering it. That's a sign that the person is a tamei. A sure sign that a person is a defiled person is when his mouth speaks without control, when his mouth speaks without reservation. If it's a kli pasuach and it speaks lashon hara, rechilas, it screams, it hurts people, it lies, it reveals secrets, that shows, because we know that Hashem created a person lenefesh chaya, a spirit of life, and the Targum says, what's the spirit of life? It's a ruach mimalala. It's a spirit that speaks. The difference between an animal and a human is the koyach of dibur, of speech. And if a person does not have a lid upon it, he doesn't have control upon it, that person is a defiled person. I had the pleasure of seeing here today my good friend Robbie Newman, the mastermind behind Chickens for Shabbos, and he told me a remarkable pshat of his own. And it's really a tremendous limud. We know that it says in the pasuk, "Hamoves v'achayim biyad haloshen," that death and life is in the hands of the tongue. So he asked me, it should say "Hamoves v'achayim b'loshen," that death and life is in the tongue. What's biyad haloshen? He says, but today we understand, because it says biyad, and biyad is texting. It's sending emails. It's sending Twitters, and IMing, and Instagramming. So a person with the yad now could do a weapon of mass destruction. That's why it says, it's mamish, the Torah looks in the future. You know, we wouldn't have been able to say this pshat 30 years ago. We wouldn't know what we're talking about. But now we understand, Hamovas Hachayim B'yad. It's in the hand. The person sends out a text. you know what somebody did? Don't use that store. I wouldn't be that person's friend. It's a weapon of mass destruction. That shows that the person is a tomei. V'nafshenu kotza b'lechem ha'kloikel. And our soul is disgusted by this lechem ha'kloikel, by this very light bread, kal, lighter than light. So Rashi explains that they were worried. Kevan shenivlo beivarim, they didn't go to the bathroom. Since it was absorbed in the Reish Mem Ches Eivarim, the Bnei Yisrael said, "V'chi efshel iskayim le'ikoneis b'loy lahitzi." Is it possible to survive, to take in food and not to excrete it? So, if they were worried about that, then I could understand that they would say, "V'nafshenu dog." Our souls were worried. But what's kotza? What's disgusted? The lechem, the man tasted like everything, like anything they wanted. What was there to be disgusted about? It's a very big kasha. I mean, you were in the mood to have tongue with mustard, it tasted like. You wanted a blintzes with sour cream, it tasted like. I don't want to make Shelley hungry. But if you were in the mood to have a hazelnut latte with whipped cream, you wanted to have strawberries and sour cream, you wanted to have a steak and hash browns, whatever you wanted, lamb chops, duck, whatever you wanted. How can you say v'nafshenu kotza? It's a very interesting thing. The Chassam Sofer, says that when they came near Ammon and Moav, they bought fruits and they went to the bathroom and they remembered the pleasure of going to the bathroom. They didn't have this pleasure for 40 years. So you'll say, what pleasure of going to the bathroom? It's a remarkable Gemara in Brachis and Daf Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Shloisha me'ein olam haba. There are 3 pleasures that are similar to the afterlife. Tashmish, Shemesh, and Shabbos. Oh, we all know that Shabbos is me'ein olam haba. The sun, the rays of the sun, how it lifts up people, how the Shemesh ba, marpei b'knafeh, we all understand that. But what's Tashmish? So the Gemara thought Tashmish is the pleasure of marital intimacy. But the Gemara says, well, that's not me'ein olam haba, because olam haba doesn't have any side effects. While Tashmish, achuk shei machish, intimacy weakens the person. So the Gemara says, Tashmish nekavav, it means going to the bathroom. The body experiences a feeling of relief and pleasure with no side effects when the body is healthy. Of course, if a person has hemorrhoids, it's not the case. If a person's constipated, it's not the case. But if a person has a healthy moving of the bowels, that's considered a pleasure. And this is what they complained, v'nafshenu kotza, that for 40 years they didn't have this pleasure. Now, I want to think about this a little bit. First of all, you shouldn't rush a person out of the bathroom. What are you taking so much time in the bathroom? You shouldn't rush. It's a pleasure for a person. And I think that we thank Hashem for this. I have to tell you that the Chassam Sofer says a big chiddush. The Chassam Sofer says that the bracha of Asher Yotzar is another bracha achrayna on food. Now we know we make a bar nefashis, we make an ala michya, an ala eitz, we bench. But he says asher yotze is also a bracha on food, because afterwards the food is fully digests, and what is no good comes out. That means the food went to all the proper places that it was needed. And the Chassam Sofer brings a proof to this, because the Gemara in Nida says there's no bracha that we say after that we don't say before. The question is, but it's not true. We make an asher yotzer after, we don't make a bracha before. But if you learn that asher yotzer is also a bracha on food, so then we do say a bracha before. But I want to say that this is pshat in the end of the bracha of asher yotzer. The end of the bracha of asher yotzer, we say Baruch atah Hashem, rofei kol basar, you cure all flesh, because a person, God forbid, if he doesn't get rid of the waste in the body, the waste will get diseased and it will poison him. So when we excrete, it's a refuah, rofei kol basar, and then we say umafli lasais, and he does wondrously. And the question is, what is that referring to? Umafli lasais. And he does wondrously. So if you look in Shulchan Aruch, it says a pshat that the body is full of a ruach, a spirit, the ruach chayim. And although the body is full of orifices, holes, openings, yet the ruach doesn't come out. If you have a balloon and you pop it, everything comes out. So one of the meanings of mafli lasais is, although the body is full of the orifices, which we realize when we go to the bathroom, even so the ruach is preserved. So that's mafli lasais. That's one pshat. There's another pshat that I like to say. My Talmidim will have heard this pshat from me before, but it's certainly worth reviewing. And that is, imagine if I took a Pashke's chocolate bar and I bit into it, and then I would have to start sending out commands. Activate the tongue, the teeth, start activating the peristalsis to get it down. Oh, now put the enzymes, this is 150 enzymes. Oh, we need some of the protein by my big right toe. Oh, start getting rid of the waste in order. 1 second, we need some food by my liver. If I'd have to give out commands, I'd say, who needs the chocolate? Give me a hole in my shoulder and pump it in, like by the gas station. But the Rabbeinu Shalom made it that all of this is done without me knowing. I don't know what part of the chocolate is good for me and what part has to be excreted. I don't know about the enzymes. I don't know the places where the food is needed. It all happens on autopilot. That's mafli lasais. That's remarkable. But now I see another pshat. You know, if we would have to, it's not so long ago. For example, my shver, my new shver, soll sein gesandt, Rabbi Danziger, remembers that when he was a boy, they still had an outhouse. They didn't have plumbing. And they had to get rid of the waste. That's a very uncomfortable job.
Small.
Very uncomfortable job. So imagine, we're going to the bathroom, we're getting rid of the waste, and the pleasure is me'ein olam haba. It's a wonderful pleasure. So it says 3 things are be'en olam haba. That's mafli lasais. We're doing waste removal, and the Rabbeinu Shalom made it as it's comfortable. It gives a person pleasure. I want to share with you something remarkable that the Nazira Shimshon says. They complained. They complained about the man. V'nafshenu kotza b'lechem hakloikel. They complained about the man. Oh, they complained about the man. Azai, the Rebbeinu Shalom sent the Nechoshim Asrafim, the fiery snakes. Says the Nazir Shimshon, what's the midah keneged midah of complaining about the man with the snakes? So it says something so remarkable, something that you wouldn't know if you didn't have the Bekias of the Gemaras. He says, what did Rashi say what they worried about? They were worried that who takes in food and doesn't excrete. So the Nazir Shimshon says, but the Gemara tells us in Masechtas Gittin, there was a creature, the Yitush, the gnat. It says the gnat has a mouth and it doesn't excrete. Oh, they conveniently forgot about the gnat. So Hashem says, I'll remind you about the gnat. Because the Gemara tells us, it's a Gemara in Masechtas Shabbos, on Daf Ayin Zayin, the Gemara says that everything in this world was created for a purpose. And that, by the way, is a big klal. We say it in our davening. Mo rabu masecha Hashem, how great are your deeds, Hashem, kulam b'chokhma asisa. They're all vested with wisdom. Wisdom means purpose. That's why we knew that the appendix was necessary. We knew that the tonsils were necessary. Hashem doesn't make extra parts. Could you imagine an assembly line with an extra part? Are they crazy? Part 63C4 in the GM assembly line. Why do they use it? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? If it's in the car, it has a purpose. That's why in the olden days, a person got tonsillitis twice, out comes the tonsils, boy gets ice cream. But we knew that that's not a good idea. Now they know that the tonsils block diseases from going down to the heart. Now they know. But that's Mo'rabu Ma'asecha Hashem Kulam B'chokhma Asisa. It's all vested with wisdom. So the Gemara says, why did they make a gnat? So the Gemara says, because gnat is a refuah for a snake bite. They take a gnat, they grind it, and it's a refuah for a snake bite. Hashem said, you forgot about the gnats. I'll send the snakes, and you're going to have to run for the gnats in order to make the remedy. And you remember, a gnat also takes in and doesn't give out, and survives. Vayiru kol ha'eda ki gava Aaron. The whole congregation saw that Aaron passed away, expired. Vayivku es Aaron shloishim yom kol beis Yisrael. Not the majority. It said by Mordechai, v'rotzi l'roi v'echav. But Aaron, vayivku es Aaron shloishim yom kol beis Yisrael. Aaron was the Oyev Shalom, the Roidev Shalom, loved by everyone. So there's the remarkable teaching in Masechtas Kala. Masechtas Kala, one of the small Masechtas, in the 3rd parak, it says that when Aaron HaKohen passed away, there followed his coffin first 80,000 boys with the name of Aaron. Why were there 80,000 boys with the name of Aaron? Because there were 80,000 couples that wanted to get divorced, and Aaron saved their marriage, and they got back together, they had a child, and they called him Aaron. Now that means that there were many more couples than 80,000, because there were many that didn't have a boy, they had a girl. And there were many that didn't have any child afterwards. So we could say that there was at least 160,000 marriages. Now, besides this showing the remarkable schus of Aaron in his pursuit of Shalom Bayis, it also gives us the very grim idea that there were many attempted divorces in the Midbar. If you divide it 160,000 by 40 years, that's 4,000 divorces, attempted divorces a year. That's 10 divorces a day. 10 divorces every day attempted during the generation of the Dordea. And you'll say to you, how could that be? How could that be? You know, where does divorce come from? A lot of divorce comes from because of our influence from the Goyim. We live with the Goyim. We see how they behave. And it rubs off on us. But we didn't live with the Goyim. We were completely insulated in the Anani HaKavod. And a lot of divorce comes because there's not enough panasa. Right? We know that if chaylev chitim yazbiech, if there's enough food, then anoising gvulei shalom, then there's in borders peace. And here they had enough food. The man satisfied us. Everybody had enough. Omer legulgalas. Everybody had enough food, everybody had enough liquid. There were no problems of parnasa. So what's going on? How could be so many divorces, attempted 10 a day for 40 years? It's possible because nobody was working. You know, it says, Gedayla malacha shemechabeda says baila. They weren't working. Now, it's true they were learning. But we see that when people work, it's a healthy thing. They weren't working. For 40 years, they weren't working. You know, I was talking, and I didn't say much this year yet. I usually share with my Olam that one of the features, the special features of me being here in South Fallsburg, is I daven every morning with the Kruller Rebbe, very great man, the son of the Spinker Rebbe, Zechzav Kosher Brachas Chus Yagim Aleinu, the grandson of the Chakal Yitzchak, who my father davened with in Salish, Zechat Tzadik Kaddish Brachas Chus Yagim Aleinu. So he told me that his tata, Rebbe Hershel Spinker, used to say that just like you have to be very careful not to leave the ksuva in the yichud shtib, in the yichud room. You have to bring home the ksuva, kala b'la ksuva, zasur l'bayla kenida. He used to say, don't leave the smile in the yichud room. He says, everybody's smiling in the yichud room. Don't leave the smile in the yichud room. It's very important in a marriage to have a smile, to smile at each other. I've said this in the past, that in the Svardi Ksuva, it includes, we have Ana Eflach, Va'oikir, Va'ezin, Va'farnes. In the Svardi Ksuva, it adds, Ana Saber, I will smile. Vayedaber ha'am be'elikimu b'Moshe, and the nation spoke against Hashem and Moshe. Vayishlach Hashem ba'am es ha'nechoshim asrufim. He sent the fiery serpents. So the Sasim Rosecha brings down that there was a Talmid Chacham that came before Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, and he would ask him questions. but he wasn't that sharp. And he would say over what Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank said according to his understanding. But it wasn't the full story. And therefore people heard Reb Tzvi, they were puzzled because it didn't fit in the Gemaras, in the Sugyas. So Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank asked him to please not say over what he says unless he fully understands everything. And it happened that after Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank passed away, he started having nightmares. And in the nightmares, he was attacked by snakes, and they were choking him, and they were biting him. And he went to psychologists, and he started taking pills, and nothing helped. He was being destroyed by these dreams every night. He woke up screaming, he woke up sweating, he wasn't rested in the morning. So a good friend told him, maybe you were Mavaza Talmud Chacham. It says that a Talmud Chacham, if you're Mavaza, is Noikem v'Noite Kenachish, takes revenge and attacks like a snake unless you ask for mechila. So he thought to himself that maybe it's that he said over things from Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank and he wasn't careful. So he went barefoot with a minion of people to ask mechila by Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, and the dream stopped. Now, this is a very important lesson. The Kruller Rebbe told me, in the name of the Apterov, that it says that Moshe Rabbeinu said to Dasan v'Aviram v'Yikra, he called Dasan and Aviram B'nei Ahaliyav to come to him. The Amru loy nale, we won't come up. So first of all, the Apterov said, what's it that it says B'nei Ahaliyav? Why does it mention their yichus over here? And furthermore, what does it mean loy nale? Lo yavai, we won't come. What does it mean loy nale? So he said as follows. He said, Moshe Rabbeinu knew that Dasan Aviram, they're not coming. Dasan Aviram caused so much problems on their own. Remember with the man, Moshe Rabbeinu said there wouldn't be a man on Shabbos. They came and they put out man on Shabbos to prove Moshe Rabbeinu wrong. Just that the birds came and ate it up. That's why some people give the bread to the birds on Shabbos Shira. I mean, they even by Yetzias Mitzrayim, they didn't go out till later. So Moshe Rabbeinu, on their own, they're not coming. But Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, but remember the Heilige Tata Aliyav. Think to yourself what the Tata would have wanted you to do. That's why he said, Dasan and Aviram B'nei Aliyav. He said also that Aliyav is Keli of. Remember, think about the Eibishter. And Dasan Aviram says, the Abder of Dasan Aviram says, Loi Nala, we don't look up. We don't go there. We don't think about the Dairis before. And the Kruller Rebbe told me it's so important for us to think about the previous generations. He said to me, do you remember things from your father? So I told him that my father used to tell me over from the Zayder of Meir, who was gassed in the concentration camps in Auschwitz. Zechet Tzadik v'Kodesh Avracha Schus Yagen Aleinu, Rav Meir. Meir ben Rabbi Yosef. Used to say his father would say Shabbos stands for Shabbos Basar Teichel, Shabbos Beim Teichel, Shabbos B'Tzolim Teichel. So he told me, Azeda the Chakal Yitzchak. And these are Bali Meifas. He said he wouldn't eat onions during the week. He said onions is a very nirdike zach. It's very lowly because it's in the ground. It's full of, it doesn't even grow above the ground. It's a bulb in the ground. It's very material. It's very chumrious. Says he would only eat onions on Shabbos. So there's a lot of talk about why onions on Shabbos. Some say that the onion, there are species of onion that has 7, when I peel an onion, there are onions that have 7 rings. It's like 7-layer cake. Rav Prager from the Novominsky, from Rapala's yeshiva, Tzaddik L'Bracha, passed away young. He once told me, it says that a lot of foods on Shabbos have a mispar of 7. Ner is 7, Nun is 5, and Reish is 2 is 7. Yayin is 7, Yud, Nun 1, 1, and 5 is 7. And it says that Chala, Ches is 8, Lamed is 3, that's 11. And Hay is 5 is 16, so 1 plus 6 is 7. And so you said Batzel is 14. Beis, Tzadik, Lamed is, Beis is 2, Tzadik is 9, is 11, and Lamed is 3, is 14. But if you cut the onion, you get 7. But he told me a fascinating thing from his father. He said that it says about Shabbos, Loiva alai vani pareya. Borrow for the Shabbos, Hashem says. If you need money, borrow for the Shabbos and I'll pay it. So he says, Batzel is a Yiddish, from Yiddish, Batzal. Batzal means to pay. So that's why we eat it, because the Rebbeinu Shalom pays. And the fact of the matter is, it says, like we say in Baruch Kalel Yain, Ashrei kol choichel l'sashlumei chayfa. Fortunate is all those that hope to be paid double. That's why, by the way, embedded in the name Shabbos is double. Shin is 3, and Beis and Saf is 6. So the result is that it's doubled. That's because we get paid double for whatever we do for Shabbos. A person says, should I buy this? Buy it! It looks like a nice piece of cake for dessert, but it's a little expensive. Buy it. Ashrei kol choichel l'sashlumei keifa. In this regard, about looking to the past, I remember I heard it was written in his biography of Shlomo Freifeld, that Rav Shlomo Freifeld bemoaned that in our generation, the young people, they have pictures of their children, their grandchildren, they have pictures adorning the wall of their married children from their chasanas, going up the steps, all their married children, but they don't have pictures of their parents. It's very important to remember the parents, to remember the lessons of the past. Every generation, the further we get away from Sinai, the smaller we are. So we have to remember, when we say in Shul, Yizker, the idea of Yizker is, I say this all the time by Yizker, this is worth remembering. The grudges aren't worth remembering. This Yizker, this is worth remembering. This is worth remembering. It says, put up pictures of parents. That you should put up. I want to mention, in closing, the remarkable people who sponsored this week's Parsha Shiur, the Goldenberg and Noble families, Lili Nishma Zev Wolf Ben Baruch, Walter Goldenberg, Ed Saleh from London, in memory of his mother, Farhabas Aaron. L'Refuah Shalema for Tamima Basrina Leah. And Tzvi and Yehuda Solomon, in honor of Philippe Black, who's going on Aliyah. And L'Zecher Nishmas, Mr. Ivan Schechter, Shlomo Chaim ben Avram Shalom, and their father-in-law, and in honor of the Rav and Rebbetzin. We want to also learn L'Refuah Shalema for Rachel Malka Bat Zipora, and our Zoom daffer, Shimon Klein, Shimon Yehuda ben Gittel. You should have a L'Refuah Shalema. Of course, we learn also for the soldiers in Eretz Yisrael that they should be safe, they should be successful, and all of Klal Yisrael should be protected. And I mentioned, as I instituted here in Elmshade Estates this past Shabbos, that we should start saying the Mishaberach for the Chayolim. And I said that Anne Frank was like the poster girl of the lost children of the Holocaust. Why do we concentrate on one holy girl? It's impossible to comprehend 1 million children under the age of 12. It's just impossible. So we focus on one child and we multiply it by 1 million. Same thing is true, I believe, the story on Hanukkah of Chana v'Shiva Baneh. Chana has 7 children. That wasn't only atrocity by Antiochus. There were many atrocities. It was a terrible time. But we take one family and we multiply it. Lahavdil. There are so many Yiddish Kinder. We have here in our Zoomers, we have a wonderful Richard Rosenzweig, whose son Mishan, he fought a mission in Gaza, and now he's up north by Lebanon. He's 26 years old. I focus on him and I multiply it by hundreds of thousands. The Rebbeinu Hashem should help them to be safe. I want to thank you all for joining. We do not yet have a sponsor for Bullock. We had a lot of sponsors for Chukas. 718-916-3100. rmmwsi@aol.com. If you want to join our Zoom Daf Yomi, tomorrow night, a special time at 9:15 as I broadcast from Monsey, all you have to do is go to zoomdaf.com and put in the passcode, which is 914408. 914408. We'd love to have you join us. Have a wonderful night and a wonderful Shabbos.